I never thought a cardboard box left on my porch would be the thing that broke me. Not the arguments, not the cold shoulders, not the months of being treated like a stranger in my own home. It was that box, sitting there in the rain, my name written on it in black marker, like I was a package being returned to sender. But when I finally opened it, I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit down on the front steps right there in the drizzle, because what was inside that box had nothing to do with what I expected, and everything to do with how much I had underestimated the one person I thought had abandoned me. Let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Raymond. I'm 67 years old. I spent 32 years working as a civil engineer for the city of Columbus, Ohio. I designed drainage systems, managed infrastructure projects, supervised younger engineers who are now running departments I helped build. I retired at 63 with a pension, a modest investment portfolio, and a house I had paid off completely, a 4-bedroom colonial on Ashford Drive that my late wife Patricia and I bought in 1989 for $112,000. By the time this story takes place, that house was worth a little over $800,000. Not because I did anything clever, just because Columbus grew and we happened to be in the right neighborhood, and Patricia had the good sense to insist on that location when I wanted something cheaper on the east side. Patricia passed away 6 years ago. Breast cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. I won't spend much time on that because the story isn't about grief. The grief is underneath all of it. After she was gone, the house got very quiet. Our son Marcus, who is 40 now, lived in Denver with his wife Claudia and their 2 kids. Our daughter Simone, who is 36, lived 20 minutes away in Westerville. Simone checked on me regularly. She called every few days, came for dinner on Sundays, helped me navigate things Patricia used to handle. The insurance renewals, the HOA paperwork, the small domestic details that I had always delegated to my wife without fully appreciating what they required. I want you to understand something about Simone before I go any further. She is not an easy person to know. She is direct in a way that some people find cold. She doesn't offer a lot of reassurance or warmth in the conventional sense. When I was recovering from a knee replacement 2 years after Patricia died, Simone didn't bring me soup and sit with me the way you might imagine. She showed up with a printed physical therapy schedule, reorganized my medications into a weekly pill organizer, and told me that self-pity was not a recovery strategy. Then she left. What I'm telling you is that Simone expressed love through action, not sentiment. I knew that. I had always known that. I just forgot it when I needed to remember it most. Marcus's wife Claudia was different. Claudia was warm in the immediate surface way that is easy to receive. She hugged me every time she saw me. She remembered my birthday. She sent long messages on the anniversary of Patricia's death. When she and Marcus began talking about moving back to Ohio, Claudia's mother had been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's, and Claudia wanted to be closer. I was genuinely glad, not just for practical reasons. I missed my son, and Claudia felt like the warmth that had been absent from Ashford Drive for 6 years. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening in March and asked if they could stay with me while they looked for a house. He said it might take 2 or 3 months. He said he would cover utilities and groceries. He said it would be good for the kids to spend time with me. I said of course, I meant it completely. They arrived on a Saturday in April with a moving truck, 2 SUVs, and approximately 6 times more furniture than I was expecting. Within a week, the dynamic of the house had shifted in ways I couldn't quite name. My home office became a playroom. The master bathroom I shared with the hallway was now Claudia's primary bathroom because, Marcus explained, the kids' bathroom didn't have enough counter space. Small things. I told myself they were small things. Claudia began suggesting improvements to the house. Not asking. Suggesting, but in a tone that expected agreement. She wanted to repaint the living room. She thought the kitchen needed updating. She mentioned that the backyard wasn't being used effectively. I nodded along at first, the way you do when you're trying to be a gracious host and you keep telling yourself it's only temporary. But 2 months became 3, then 4. The house search, Marcus told me, was complicated. The market was difficult. Inventory was low, I understood. I said nothing. What I noticed more slowly, too slowly, was the way Claudia began speaking about the house, not as a temporary arrangement, but as a fixed reality. She told her friends in my presence that they lived in a lovely colonial in Columbus. Not we're staying with my father-in-law. Not even we're in between houses. She said we live here. I remember standing in the kitchen doorway when she said it, holding a coffee mug, and feeling something cold move through me that I couldn't immediately identify. I identified it later. It was recognition. I was recognizing something I hadn't wanted to see. The shift happened gradually over those months, but there was one evening I can point to as the moment I understood what was actually happening. It was a Sunday in September. Simone had come for dinner as she usually did. Claudia had cooked. She was a good cook, I'll give her that. And the conversation at the table had been pleasant enough. After the meal, while Marcus and I were watching football in the living room, I overheard Claudia and Simone in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to listen. The house carries sound in particular ways, especially in autumn when the windows are closed. Claudia was saying that the neighborhood had appreciated significantly, that a comparable house 2 streets over had sold for $860,000 just last month. She said, and I will not forget this as long as I live. She said that it seemed inefficient for one elderly person to occupy a house this size on a fixed income. She used those exact words. One elderly person. Inefficient. Simone said something I couldn't hear clearly. Then Claudia's voice again, lower now but still audible. Marcus and I have already talked about it. We think it makes sense for Raymond to look at some of the newer senior communities. There's a very nice one in Dublin. We could help him get settled. I sat very still in my armchair. On the television, someone scored a touchdown and the crowd roared and Marcus said something enthusiastic and I nodded as if I had been paying attention. Simone came and found me after they left. She sat across from me in the chair Patricia used to use and looked at me for a long moment. Dad, she said, how much do you actually know about what Marcus and Claudia have been doing? I told her I didn't understand the question. She pulled out her phone and showed me something. I don't want to tell you what it was yet because you need to understand the order in which I learned things. What I will say is that what she showed me made the cold feeling from before return with considerable force. How long have you known? I asked her. A few weeks, she said. I've been careful about what I can actually prove. I asked her what she intended to do. Nothing yet, she said. I need you to trust me and not say anything to Marcus or Claudia. Can you do that? I told her I could. I didn't know if it was true. What Simone showed me was the beginning of a paper trail. Marcus, using a power of attorney document that I had signed 2 years earlier for a different purpose entirely, had begun inquiring with a real estate attorney about transferring the deed of the house into a jointly held trust. The trust would nominally include my name but would grant Marcus and Claudia equal authority over sale decisions. The paperwork had not yet been filed, but the consultations had happened. Invoices existed. Emails existed. Simone had found a forwarded email in a shared family account that Marcus had apparently forgotten she could access. When I fully understood what I was looking at, I had to set the phone down on the coffee table and breathe carefully for a moment. This was my son. The boy I coached in Little League, the one who cried at his mother's funeral in a way that Marcus normally never allowed himself to cry. This was that person. I want to be honest with you about what I felt, because I think it matters. I didn't feel rage, not immediately. I felt something older and sadder than rage. I felt the specific grief of understanding that someone you love has been looking at your life and seeing an obstacle. Over the following weeks, I did what Simone asked. I said nothing. I watched. And what I watched was instructive. Claudia began introducing small financial conversations. Had I thought about liquidity? Had I spoken with a financial advisor recently? Did I have a sense of what my monthly expenses were in retirement? On their own, these questions were not unreasonable. In context, they felt like reconnaissance. Marcus took me to lunch on a Wednesday and brought up the senior community in Dublin as if it were a spontaneous thought. He said a colleague's father had moved there and loved it. He said the amenities were genuinely impressive. He said, and here is the part that I keep returning to, he said, "You've done everything right, Dad. You've built something. But at some point, It makes sense to simplify. He smiled at me when he said it. He meant it kindly, I think. That is the part I keep returning to. I think he meant it kindly. Meanwhile, Simone was building something I was not fully aware of. She is an attorney. I may have neglected to mention that earlier. Estate and property law, specifically. She had been practicing for 11 years. I knew what she did for a living. I had simply never connected that fact to my current circumstances in any practical way, which in retrospect says something about how thoroughly I was not anticipating what Marcus and Claudia were planning. She quietly had the power of attorney reviewed and found that its scope had likely been misrepresented to her. She consulted with a colleague about the trust inquiry Marcus had made. She pulled the property records and confirmed there had been no unauthorized filings yet. She also, and I did not know this until later, had a conversation with Marcus's real estate attorney that apparently made clear the extent to which what was being contemplated could constitute fraud. I didn't know any of this was happening. What I knew was that Simone had become cooler toward me at Sunday dinners, less warm than her usual contained warmth. She answered my calls briefly. She seemed distracted. Once, when I asked her how everything was going, she said, "Fine, Dad," and changed the subject quickly. I told myself she was busy. I reminded myself that Simone expressed love through action, not sentiment. I tried to hold on to that. Then in early November, Marcus and Claudia sat down with me after the kids were in bed and told me they had found a house. In Powell, north of Columbus. Wonderful neighborhood, good schools, more space for the kids. They were very excited. They told me the closing date was set for January 15th. They thanked me for my hospitality. Claudia hugged me and said she didn't know what they would have done without my support through such a difficult transition. Marcus shook my hand. I said I was happy for them, and I meant it. Or I wanted to mean it. I was also aware of a tight, watchful feeling I couldn't entirely release. 2 weeks before they were scheduled to move out, Simone stopped returning my calls. Not completely. She would send short text messages saying she was swamped. She'd call soon. She was thinking of me. But the Sunday dinners stopped. Twice I drove by her apartment and her car wasn't there. When I finally reached her on the phone for more than 2 minutes, she was clipped and distracted. She told me she had a complex case consuming her. She said she'd explain everything soon. I won't pretend that didn't hurt. I'm 67 years old and I know myself well enough to admit that. The silence from my daughter during those weeks felt like the floor giving way. Then came the morning of December 22nd. I woke up at 6:15 as I usually do. I made coffee. I walked to the front door to bring in the newspaper, which is an old habit I have never broken. On the porch, next to the paper, was a cardboard box. Medium-sized, the kind liquor stores give away. My name was written on the top in black marker. No other label. No return address. I assumed it was a misdelivery, or possibly something Marcus or Claudia had left out by mistake. I picked it up and brought it inside. I set it on the kitchen table and opened it while my coffee was brewing. Inside on top was an envelope. Below the envelope, neatly arranged, were printed documents, legal documents, from the weight and formatting of them. I opened the envelope first. The letter was from Simone. She had written it by hand, which she almost never does. 4 pages, front and back, in her small, controlled handwriting. I am going to tell you what it said, but I cannot read it to you the way she wrote it because it would undo me. She told me that 7 weeks earlier, she had discovered the full scope of what Marcus and Claudia had been planning. It wasn't just the trust inquiry. Marcus had also, over the preceding months, been having conversations with a financial advisor, not mine, about liquidating my investment portfolio and consolidating assets under what was described as a family estate structure. The rationale given was elder financial planning. The actual mechanism would have shifted control of approximately $430,000 in investments to an account that Marcus would administer. She told me she had spent those 7 weeks being deliberately cold and distant from me because she needed me to behave normally around Marcus and Claudia, and she knew that if she told me what she had found, I would not be able to. She knew me. She was right. She told me she had spent those weeks working with 2 colleagues, a forensic accountant, and ultimately the Franklin County District Attorney's Office. She told me that Marcus had been interviewed 12 days ago. She told me that Claudia, it emerged, had been the primary architect of the financial planning components, while Marcus had provided access and cooperation. She told me the DA had determined that what had occurred and what had been attempted constituted elder financial exploitation under Ohio law, and that charges were being filed. She told me she was sorry for the silence. She said she knew how it had felt, and she wished there had been another way. Then she told me to look at the documents below the letter. The top document was a deed, the house on Ashford Drive, solely in my name, with a notation that any outstanding trust inquiries had been formally withdrawn and that a protective legal instrument had been filed, preventing any transfer without my direct, witnessed, and attorney-verified consent. Below that was a financial statement. My investment portfolio fully intact with a notation from my own financial institution confirming that no unauthorized transactions had occurred and that additional security measures had been implemented. Below that was a smaller envelope. Inside was a cashier's check made out to me in the amount of $43,000. This, the attached note explained, was a recovery of fees and costs that Claudia had quietly redirected from a joint household expense account Marcus had opened, with funds transferred from my checking account during their stay. I had not been aware the account existed. Simone had traced it through the forensic accountant. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The coffee finished brewing and I did not pour it. Outside, a neighbor's car started and pulled out of the driveway. A dog barked twice somewhere down the street. Everything was completely ordinary. I was sitting in my own kitchen, in my own house, holding a cashier's check for $43,000 that my daughter had spent 7 weeks in silence recovering for me, and I could not find the words for what I was feeling. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. I didn't say anything for a moment. She didn't either. "Simone," I finally said. "Hi, Dad. How long were you planning to do this without telling me?" "Until it was done," she said. "I couldn't risk you confronting Marcus before the DA was involved. You know how you are." I laughed, which I had not expected to do. It came out rough and a little broken. "Yeah," I said. "I know how I am." "Are you okay?" I looked around my kitchen. The table Patricia and I bought at an estate sale in 1994. The window over the sink that always stuck in the summer. The pencil marks on the door frame from when Marcus and Simone were kids, measuring their height every birthday. My house. My life. Still mine. "I'm okay," I said. "Come for coffee." She was there in 45 minutes. We sat at the table and she walked me through everything. All the details she hadn't put in the letter. And I listened without interrupting, which was difficult because I had questions. But I could see she needed to tell it in order. When she finished, I asked about Marcus. She told me he had retained an attorney. She said the process would be slow. She said she was sorry about that too. I told her she had nothing to be sorry for. I want to tell you the thing that has stayed with me most from that conversation. It wasn't about Marcus, and it wasn't about the money. Though I want to be clear that $43,000 is not an amount I am dismissing. What stayed with me was a moment near the end, when I asked Simone why she hadn't simply told me what she suspected at the very beginning, back when she first showed me that email on her phone. She thought about it for a moment. Then she said, "Because if I had told you everything I suspected, you would have gone to Marcus immediately. You would have given him the chance to explain himself, and he would have found a way to make you believe the explanation. He's your son, Dad. You want to believe him. That's not a flaw. It's just how you love people." She paused. "I needed to build something you couldn't argue yourself out of," she said. So I did. I didn't say anything for a while. Outside the kitchen window, the December light was thin and gray, and the maple in the backyard had dropped all its leaves. I thought about what it had cost her to keep that silence. 7 weeks of letting me think she had pulled away. 7 weeks of knowing I was confused and hurt and not being able to tell me why. She had carried all of that because she knew her father, and she had worked quietly in the background, and she had built something I couldn't argue myself out of. That is how my daughter loves people. The case was resolved the following spring. I will not go into the specific legal outcomes in detail because there are aspects of it that remain a family matter, and because Marcus is still my son, and this story is not about punishment. What I will tell you is that the house is mine. The portfolio is mine. The life that Patricia and I built on Ashford Drive remains exactly what we intended it to be. Something I carry forward, on my terms, for as long as I choose. I still live in Columbus. I still take my coffee on the back porch in the mornings when the weather allows. The pencil marks on the door frame are still there. I have not painted over them. Simone comes for dinner on Sundays. She still doesn't bring soup when I'm unwell. She still calls love by the name of action. She showed up last March with a new deadbolt and a locksmith and changed every lock in the house without being asked, and then sat down and had coffee like nothing had happened. I've been thinking a lot lately about something she said to me when she was maybe 12 years old. We were driving somewhere. I don't even remember where. And she was quiet for a long stretch, which was unusual for her at that age. Then she said, out of nowhere, "Dad, what's the point of building something if you don't make sure it stays standing?" I told her that was a good question. I told her that was actually what engineers spend most of their time thinking about. Not the construction, but the integrity. Making sure it holds. She nodded like that made sense to her and went back to looking out the window. She was 12. She figured it out faster than I did. If you're watching this and you have someone in your life who shows up quietly, who does the difficult thing without announcing it, who sometimes goes silent when they're actually working hardest on your behalf, I want you to think about whether you've told them recently what that means to you. I didn't say it well enough or often enough for most of Simone's life. I'm saying it now, not because it changes anything, but because some things deserve to be said out loud, even when it's a little late. My daughter threw a cardboard box on my porch in the rain, and when I opened it, I found my whole life still inside.